Hello everyone, and welcome back to a build inspired by... Now, in today's video we are starting off at the build we did in the last episode, which was inspired by Scott Smager. Maybe watch that if you haven't already. And in today's video we're going to be tackling a build inspired by possibly the best builder in all of Minecraft history, BDoubleO. So, let's go. Now, the main thing you need to know about BDubs' building style is that it is all about the aesthetic. In almost all of BDubs' builds, walking around them is an incredibly immersive experience, with there always being something new to see. Of all his previous builds, not including the masterpiece he's currently working on in Hermitcraft Season 10, his medieval town from Hermitcraft Season 7 is the one that inspires me the most. There is an enviable attention to detail paid to every single block choice, which creates an atmospheric feel like no other. But of course, it is the castle that is the main star of the show. This intricate structure might well be one of my favourite buildings in Hermitcraft, although I feel it often gets overlooked. The colour palette in particular stands out to me because of the way BDubs has once again blended the bright blue roof so naturally with the rest of the more natural colours. If you couldn't tell from previous episodes, coloured roofs are one of my favourite things to build. Beautiful block variation and gradients is something BDubs is well known for, and it is this, along with the atmospheric nature of the build, that I wish to translate to my very own castle. To begin with, I laid out a circle of cyan terracotta to form the base of the central turret. I think that's the right word, but I'm not up to date on my castle terminology. Anyway, I decided on a gradient of dark to light, similar to the one that BDubs used by incorporating unorthodox blocks such as acacia logs and cyan terracotta. There are a few reasons why you might choose to use a gradient in builds, and some cases where you probably shouldn't. For me personally, I tend to use gradients when I want to direct the eye in certain directions, in this case upwards, or when I need to blend colours together without it clashing, which is particularly effective at large scales. You can also use gradients to detail certain areas, but it's not always necessary. Sometimes having blank or negative space is important to ensure that your build doesn't look too busy. Now, as we reach the top of the build, I began work on the crenellations, a castle term I do know. It was actually quite difficult to find a pattern that worked here. I wanted it to be evenly spaced out while still having regular gaps. I ended up settling on the 2 block wide you can see here, but the diagonals presented yet more issues. Building on diagonals is not easy because essentially things look a bit weird. In this case, I managed to solve the issue using stairs in the corners, which isn't exactly even, but sometimes good enough is fine. Now, one cylinder wouldn't be the most interesting build, so I decided to add an additional supporting structure, beginning as you should always do with the wooden frame. I went with a darker log choice to match the rest of the build, along with a steeply pitched roof. I then filled in the walls with the same gradient to help it feel as much as part of the castle as the central tower, and finished up by filling in the roof. I used a subtle gradient in a different way here to create blobs of slightly less oxidized copper. To be perfectly honest, I don't fully know why I built these structures the way I did, but they fulfill their purpose well enough, which is adding interest to what will eventually be the entrance, so it isn't just a blank wall with a door in. Here you can see me adding the main contrasting section to the build, in the form of this white tower, using a gradient again because at this point it's just the theme of the build. I then added on a tower roof design, planning out the shape using a deep slate tile trim leading to a central point. I then filled it in with the same cyan texturing that we used earlier to help tie the different section of the build together nicely. Now for what is arguably the standout feature of the castle, the floating tower, because why not? This is a design that you can see in BDoubleO's castle, and I absolutely had to incorporate it here. I built a curved bridge to connect the two together with a walkway, and then got to work using the same gradient as I used in the other tower to help add some consistency to the build. The roof design is similar to the one I built before, but the deep slate trim is much less prominent, instead allowing the blue roof to develop a much more unique shape and clear gradient, leading again to a central point. Now it's time to add details such as windows and whatever this pulley thing is, to make sure your walls aren't just blank expanses of nothing. This mural, or symbol, is very much a minimised version of what BDoubleO had on his castle, which in turn is somewhat reminiscent of a design you might see on a cathedral wall. I enjoyed making the backdrop a reference to the rest of the build's colours as well. Vegetation is always important, and in this case I wanted to add some intrigue by almost suggesting that the vines were in some way supporting the tower. And no castle is complete without a flag, so I decided to build this one on the roof, where it is clearly visible, and used the colours I have throughout the rest of the building process. Of course, a build should always be incorporated into the environment surrounding it, and the easiest way to do that is using a simple entrance pathway. In this case, I really wanted to use the new-ish mud blocks to create a more natural winding pathway. Next, I added in the same cypress trees I built in my last episode. It makes sense that the entrance to a castle would be highly landscaped and well maintained, featuring these nice manicured trees. I also added in some rocks to the landscape because it's on a cliff and I thought I might as well. Sometimes you don't need complex reasoning. So here we have it, our very own castle, or crastle as BDoubleO would say, inspired by the man himself. Now, as you can see, we've got a little gradient going on, which, in retrospect, given the new tough blocks in 1.21, would probably be greatly improved, but I don't have time to fix that, so just use your imagination, I guess. I don't know what to tell you, to be honest. But in general, I'm really happy with the atmosphere I've created with this place, and the slight intrigue we've got going on here. I wonder what all this is about. Why is it floating? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe you know? Now, heading around the back, we've got a few new additions, which you will not have seen in the time-lapse. Mostly these trees here. Now, these are the trees that Fwip designed and used in this hardcore world, but I just really... Oh! Never mind. I really love these trees. I love the simplicity of the design, and I love the little mushrooms as well. I think the little mushrooms add a lot to the build. Now, if there's one thing I will say, one critique I have is that I don't like the way this is blended together. I tried to do something here, but I don't think it works very well. Up at the top, we've got this lovely flag design. This is also a design that I've used from someone else because I'm bad at making organic shapes. Noticing a theme here? I'll leave a link in the description to that as well. But generally, I really enjoy the vibe I've created here. I think it's interesting. So I hope you enjoyed whatever happened here. Now, I know a build inspired by the one and only BDoubleO has a lot to live up to, and I'm hoping I did it somewhat justice. Obviously, there's always things to work on, but I hope it lives up to your expectations, and maybe you even learnt something along the way too. Until next time though, I know these episodes have been a little bit few and far between, but hopefully you did enjoy it. Remember to leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment, because that really helps me out and I would appreciate it quite a lot. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. That's all folks. Bye!